Yoko Taro is a weird guy. Yeah, he's pretty weird. And his games tend to reflect that. They're pretty weird themselves. And I don't just mean the stories. The stories are weird, don't get me wrong. But weird stories aren't that unusual. We've always had stuff like Shin Megami Tensei, Dark Souls, basically all of the Xenosaga and Xenoblade games. My point is the Japanese have been making weird stories in video games for a really long time. But for Taro, it's not just the story, the actual games are structured in weird ways, with their multiple endings and obscure unlock conditions. Those conditions can range from getting all the weapons to deleting your save files. So I got curious as to why that might be. And when doing research, I came across in several places Yoko Taro talking about what he calls the invisible wall in video game development. Now, the wall is super interesting as a concept, and I think it explains why his games end up being so unusual. So what is it? Well, here's a diagram that he showed at a GDC event in 2014. Now, on the outside of this diagram is all the things that you can't do in a video game. Basically, everything outside the circle represents stuff that, because it's a video game, it can't be done. For whatever reason. It could be ethical concerns, or it could be technological limitations. For whatever the reason, outside the circle are things that are impossible. For example, there are limits to the kind of sexual depiction that you can do. Or another example is there's only so much money that you could conceivably get to work on your project. You're not going to be working on a game that's worth $1 billion. Inside the circle, however, is all the potential of video games. All the things that they could be. Now, Taro's claim is that between the things that you can't do and the things that you can do, there exists a no man's land, a gray area of the unknown. You don't know if those things can be done or not. And at the border to this unknown space is the invisible wall. I quote Taro from that GDC event. It has been quite some time since our industry started. Within the time and costs allowed, we are making games intelligently, and at the same time, certain sorts of rules and standards have been set in place. Games must be played for a certain amount of hours, or gameplay must be fun, or story should move people. Rules like these. And we call this the invisible wall. The invisible wall only covers the potential of games and doesn't allow for anything else. But is this really true? Isn't there more we can do? For example, let's say that there was a full-priced game that only lasted 10 minutes. No one would ever approve this. But what if those 10 minutes were the most beautiful 10 minutes that can be experienced here on Earth? Or another example, a game no human can clear. Can that not exist? Or another one, an item you can only get by chowing down on 10 Burger King Whoppers in 10 minutes. Just thinking about these things, these ideas, makes my heart beat. I sense that there must be a lot of emotional peaks on the other side of that invisible wall. End quote. Now, the first time I heard Yoko Taro talking about this invisible wall, a lot of things started to make sense for me. Like, for example, I've always suspected, now I can't prove this, but I've always thought that the gameplay on Drakengard 1 sucked on purpose. Because it did suck, there's no question about that. But its boring, repetitive nature kind of always seemed to me to really highlight the atmosphere of that whole game. I mean, you're killing hordes and hordes of enemy soldiers, and sometimes enemy child soldiers. I suspect that if I had asked Taro back then why his gameplay sucks so much, he'd probably say something to me like, "You're killing hundreds of people. It's not supposed to be fun." Obviously, I don't know for sure that's what was going through his head, but we do know for sure that's the kind of thing he would do. He doesn't think that gameplay necessarily has to be fun, after all. But regardless, knowing about the invisible wall really made me look at his games in a different light, especially Nier and Automata. In order to see Nier's final ending, you have to delete all of your save data from all of your files. At some point, someone said to Taro that Nier's deleting save data was taking a step into the place video games should not go, and Taro's reaction to that was like, good. That's exactly what I've been trying to do for the last 20 years. Nier represents Taro's first tentative step past that invisible wall. It's a small step, but he seems proud of the accomplishment. When you think about it, it's a genuinely impressive accomplishment. Because in principle, what we're supposed to be doing as the player is giving up something of potentially real-world value, our save data that we've been collecting all this time, and we give it up to save an in-game character. And then for Nier Automata, he managed to take it one step further. Now, I'm not going to spoil the ending to Automata, just in case anyone watching this video hasn't played it yet, because really, it's very impressive, and it's the kind of thing I would hate to have spoiled for me. But what I am going to talk about is the inspiration that led to the development of that ending. This is the Coca-Cola Small World machines. These machines are some of the coolest things I've ever seen. This was a project by Coca-Cola with a very simple premise. Basically, you'd put two of these machines in two different countries. The machines had a monitor that lets you see the people on the other side. A game will pop up on the monitors and you'll have to play it with the person on the other side. If you clear the game, then you get a Coke. It's pretty simple. Now, what wasn't simple, and what is impressive, is that these machines were located in Pakistan and India, two countries that have been divided by war historically for decades. So as a concept, this is awesome. These Coca-Cola machines exist firmly on the other side of that invisible wall. Now, like I said, I'm not going to spoil the ending to Nier Automata, but if you've played it, you can already see the parallels. Because of Nier, the player base was already expecting to have to give up their save data to unlock the final ending. But in this case it was a little different. You weren't giving up your save data for a fictional character. You were giving up your save data for a real person, somewhere in the real world. Now, whoever that person is, it's a total stranger. There's a good chance that you might not like the person, you might differ with them politically, they might have a different religion than you. There could be some truly fundamental things that you can't see eye to eye on. But you still do it. And this time you don't even get a Coke. You get nothing out of this. And the other player has no means to reciprocate. At best, you can hope that the player that you helped might do the same for someone else. Nier Automata is the furthest Taro has gotten into that unexplored territory, that unknown domain past the invisible wall. And now that Automata is such an enormous success, he's not just some cult classic creator anymore. He's firmly in the mainstream. There's a good chance Square Enix will trust him with the resources and creative freedom that he's going to need to get even closer to the edge. And Automata's ending was just so impressive that I want to know how far he can go with this concept. I want to know how much farther in he can get to that invisible wall.